Having a simple and bulletproof system definitely makes the hard times a lot easier. And after 4 years of building the BMW, I finally have one that just works. So in this video, I want to show you what my system looks like and how I use it to plan and organize everything for my second build, the off-road Sportster, so that at the end of the video, you can just copy it and don't have to spend hours developing your own. Building my first custom bike has been a dream come true. But it has also been one of the most challenging projects of my entire life. Turning this stock 1978 BMW i80 into a scrambler has taken me 4 years of learning new skills and spending a lot more money than I initially anticipated. A lot of the time I felt absolutely overwhelmed, and I learned the hard way that you definitely need a good system to track your project. Because not having one has cost me countless hours and hundreds of dollars. One major area that I overlooked in the beginning and that led to a lot of this chaos down the line was the planning, budgeting and organization of the project. I was so focused on trying to make quick progress in the beginning and at the same time super overwhelmed with having to learn 3 new skills that I just didn't track any of the parts I bought or any of the information that I researched. Halfway through the project, my lack of documentation caught up to me. I had absolutely lost all overview of my spending, and I often wasted hours just to find this one tutorial that I had watched 3 weeks ago because I didn't save it anywhere. So at some point it was so bad that I finally sat down and went through the thousands of emails that I got over the past 2 years just to find the receipts and finally track everything that I should have tracked from day one. That task was so absolutely annoying that I promised myself that I would further improve and simplify the system to a point where a 5-year-old could use it, because I never wanted to end up in that situation again. And I think the key point to building a simple system is to choose the right software. You want to choose a software that is either super simple to use or that you already know, because you don't want to end up with a software that you have to spend hours just to understand it. And that's also why I didn't go with Notion, which can do a lot of things, but to me it seemed too complicated just to track the project. So I chose 2 softwares that are super easy to use and also free. The first one is Google Sheets, and I use that to track all of the parts that I buy. I call that my build sheet, and I'm going to show you in just a second what that looks like. Before I do that, I want to show you my second half of the system, which I think is even more important because that is basically my second brain. And I use that to save anything that I see that I think might be remotely interesting or useful for my build. So every tutorial, every reference picture, any idea that I have for a part that I might want to build in the future, it all gets saved in this one app, which is called Milanote. And with the system that I have developed, it is finally very easy for me to see something, know exactly where I have to save it, and thereby also know where I can find it when I actually need it for the build. Let me show you how it works. So when you first open Milanote, you basically get a blank canvas that expands as you fill it. So you can put as much in there as you want. This is what my home screen looks like. So I use it for a bunch of different areas of my life. But if we go in here, this is my motor wrenches area, and all of these squares are basically like individual folders. So here we have the one for the BMW build, and here we have the one for the Harley. Let me quickly show you the one for the BMW, because I don't want you to copy this, but I want you to have an idea of how my system developed. As you can see here, I try to keep it very narrow and kind of organized, but I didn't know a lot of the features when I first started that actually make Milanote so powerful. So you can see, for example, I have a lot of links right here where you don't really know what they're for. And then I also created individual boards for each of the steps. So let's say BMW emblem, which I wanted to change. I then have the different to-dos and like links in there. But for the Harley, I improved this system so much because with this BMW system, it wasn't always clear where I had to save things. And then I also had a hard time finding stuff. If you have a hard time finding things, you can always just search, but maybe you don't know what words you use in order to save that. So it's a little bit trickier. Let me show you the Harley one, because this is actually the proper one. All the way on the left, I have a current shopping list. So these are all of the parts that I know that I still need to buy, but I haven't bought them yet. For example, the extended clutch cable, but then also all of the parts that I need to build the custom exhaust. All of this gets saved in here, but only until I have actually bought them. At the moment, when I buy them, I delete them from here and copy all of the details into the build sheet, which I'm going to show you in just a second. So now when we move right, there are 3 columns that I do before the project starts. The first one is basically researching what is allowed and what isn't allowed. This might only be so long because I'm German and I'm used to having very, very strict rules when it comes to customizing a bike. If you live somewhere that is more liberal and you can build basically whatever you want, this might not be as relevant to you. But just to show you how traumatized I am from the German laws, I'm going to show you one of my most German moments after I moved from Germany to the States.
I mean, you don't necessarily have to talk to the police about customizing a motorcycle. I'm going to tell you right now, like, changing forks and stuff isn't going to make it not pass.
So as you see here in Virginia, nobody really cares, not even the police. So all of my research that I did is kind of obsolete. But something that I'm happy that I have it is the model research before actually buying this bike. When I started the BMW build, I didn't really know anything about building custom bikes or motorcycles in general. So I wasn't really sure what I had to look for. So I skipped the model research, but it always haunted me, and I learned from it that it's actually very important to do a proper research on what they changed when specific models had certain issues, which parts were introduced, whatever. So before starting the Sportster project, I actually did that and went through all of the different years and noted the most important changes. What I often do is I write a little summary at the top, but I always save where I get the information from, so I can always go back and double check something. Then the next column is, I call it the manual, but it's basically just an overview of the stock bike that I actually bought. So I have the VIN in here, then I have already installed upgrades, and then just like different information on this specific model and year that I bought. These 2 columns are just random. I didn't really know when they would come in handy, but I still knew that I wanted to save this information. Now we move on and we get to the proper project parts. So as you can see here, this is actually quite long. And the way how I organize my things now is every part on the bike gets its own column, and they are in no specific order. It's just how I research them. How this works is whatever I research, I put in here. For example, I have done research on the exhaust, and I heard about the stepped headers to get an improved sound. So I did my calculations on a piece of paper, took a picture with my phone, put this in here for when I'm building the exhaust. I have different options for slip-ons. I have a reference picture here. So all of these things that might come in handy for building an exhaust, all of that is in here. The same I did for the rear shocks, for example, as a different example. I have screenshots in here of someone talking about YSS rear shocks that they used. This is a picture of a company that builds very high quality Harleys. I have the information for the eyelets in here, different companies that I contacted in order to try to find one that could provide these. Then I have a video in here where you can see the rear shocks, but you can't really make out what the name of the brand is. I thought it could be 17-inch K-Tech, which I actually ended up going with, but there's another company that is called Racetech, which has similar shocks, and they are super nice and very easy to order if you go through the Rusty Butcher website, for example. So all of this information gets saved in here. So I do that for all of the different parts, and as you can see, for example, with the front end, some parts are very, very difficult to research or need a lot of research, and then some others, like the ignition cover, for example, are very easy. Anything that I think might be useful at some point gets saved in here. Then if we move all the way to the right, we have a different section. At some point, I think about maybe doing a second style iteration. So that's the vintage style. But since that is completely different from the first part of the project, I don't want these to kind of like be mixed. So I'm basically starting this whole left section again just as vintage. So vintage front fender, vintage headlight, vintage gas tank, all of that will be saved in here. And then if we move further right, we have another section. And this is basically the first one that I started with initially, because I feel like every project starts with like a collection of inspiration of other builds. So I have a lot of Pinterest pictures in here. I have a lot of links to other like blog posts about Harleys or videos. So that is basically how I organize my whole second brain system. And this way you always know where to save things and also how to find it. So let's say you see a fabrication video on Instagram about a guy making an exhaust, you save that into the exhaust column. If you want to find it again, you know this was about exhaust, you go in there, you find it. Let's say I'm looking for something like the throttle, for example. We go in here, let's see where we would find this. So throttle is within the handlebar setup, part of that. So we go down, I have different sections for each of the different components. And there you go, we have the throttle. So now that you know how this can look like, let me quickly show you how you can actually set this up with just two of the tools that Milanote provides. So you have a clean board. How I start is I grab the column, I put this here, and let's say we are researching the Mo unit from Motor Gadget. Maybe I want to take a screenshot. So I capture this, and then you can just simply drag and drop this in here. Now you might want to save an idea about this. You can do that by using the note feature. If you want to save this website as a link, you can copy the link and then create another note in here. And if you just copy the link and press enter, it creates a preview of the website, which is very nice. So that is a huge difference to how I did it with the BMW. What you can also do is, let's say you find an interesting video about how to wire the Mo unit. You can just copy the link from YouTube and then put another note, save that. And what it does again is you get a nice preview of the video, you get the thumbnail, and you know exactly what it's about. And then lastly, what I sometimes use, but not too often, is you can also add a to-do list. You can put this in here and then you can check off the tasks. So with these few tools, you can basically build out the whole overview of your project, and it's super simple and easy to know exactly where to save stuff and how to find it. The nice thing about Milanote, and that's also why I like it so much and what makes it so easy to use, is that you can access it through almost any device. You can have an app on your laptop, which is probably the easiest way to use it, but you can also use it in any browser. So for example, you are at a friend's house, you can still open it and show them your project, save stuff. And then as a third way, you can also use the Milanote app on my phone. That's probably the second most used way for me, because it's super easy to take screenshots or photos, upload them. And there are two ways how you can do that. You can either just do a quick note, so it gets saved in this generic phone folder, which you can then access from your laptop and drag and drop everything where it needs to go. Or you go directly into the board on your phone and save everything directly where it needs to go. I find that's a little bit more tedious, so I save everything just as a quick note and organize it later on my laptop. So that makes it super, super easy to use. The only downside is that I can't use it as my build sheet yet, because the tables in Milanote don't have the same functionalities as Excel or Google Sheets, for example. So that is still in Google Sheets. And as I said, I use that to track all of my parts that I buy when they arrive, all of the links, everything. All right, so this is what my build sheet looks like for the Harley. And in case you don't know how to set up a Google Sheet, just quickly go and Google that, pause the video, and then come back once you know that. So let's go through it column by column, and I explain exactly what I save where. In the first column, I have the category, so I can basically filter and organize it by parts category. The second column is the part's name. So here I put the proper name for each of the part. In the third column, I have the quantity. For some parts, you need to buy more than one. So that is marked in here. I always want to have the price per unit, so I know exactly how much I paid for one indicator or the headlight or whatever. Then we have two columns that you probably don't need. The discount one is just for fun. That has no real implication on the budget or the price. Then the sponsoring probably doesn't apply to you, but for the Harley build, I actually got a few partners and they sponsored some of the parts, so I wanted to mark that. The next one is one that might seem marginal, but you should definitely track it, and that is shipping, because that can actually get a lot more expensive than you might think. At least for me it did when I built the BMW. Shipping was 300 euros. I mean, you can't do anything about it, but it's definitely money that you're spending on the project and that you should budget for. By the way, if you want to have a complete budget breakdown for the BMW, I'm gonna make one in one of the next weeks, so I'm gonna put you that down below in the description in case you're watching this afterwards. The next column is the total, and if you don't have the discount and the sponsoring, then this is actually a lot easier. All I do here is I multiply the quantity by the price, and then I add the shipping, and that gives me the total for each of the parts. I noticed when I was building the BMW that I would sometimes lose overview of where packages were if something didn't arrive. So for this system, I wanted to have a dedicated space where I could track the packages. Status is basically the status of my buying process for that part. In the beginning, it says open, or maybe if I'm still thinking about it, it's optional. And then either I decide I don't need it if it was optional, or if it was open and I bought it, I would put ordered, and then I would put the ETA for the package and also the package tracking number in here. And then once that arrived, I would put this to arrived, so I know I have it at least somewhere. And then for the reference, I would then go into the invoice and copy the invoice number. I always save the specific link to where I bought something. And then lastly, what I think is very important is to save all of your thoughts for that part. So I have the notes column. In here, I save stuff like dimensions, for example, for the tires and the tubes. I sometimes save alternatives. So that is my basic overview of my build sheet. But obviously sometimes, especially when you're building the first bike, it might not be this clear from the beginning. So what you can do, I would just start a new page, then copy the top row so you have all of that, copy that in here, and then I would go in here and copy everything that you might have, all the 5 alternatives for your headlights. And then once you decided on one alternative, you would just go in here, copy that, and put it into your expenses, into your proper build sheet. And that way you still have all of the information on the alternatives. You can see all of the different prices and kind of make a better decision, but your build sheet stays clean and your total, your budget doesn't get messed up because you still have 5 alternative headlights in there. That way you stay organized, but you still have all of the relevant information to make proper decisions in here. If you want to have a template for the build sheet and don't want to create your own structure, you can download the Harley one through the link down below and just delete all of the parts and then start with your own parts, but it has the exact structure that I'm using to stay on track with everything. You can also just copy the system in Milanote and in Google Sheets. I just want you to have a system that works. Let me know what you're building and what challenges you're encountering. And if you enjoy this type of content and you want to follow the Harley build, then definitely subscribe to the channel. And if you want to catch up on the Harley build, then I'm gonna put you the full playlist right here.